Think you know the Aztecs? Human sacrifices, gold, and gods? Yeah, it's way more complicated and way more epic. Here are 5 Aztec myths you probably still believe. Number 1. The Aztecs were just bloodthirsty savages. When most people think Aztecs, their minds go straight to one thing: human sacrifice. And sure, it happened. They did offer hearts to the gods, sometimes a lot of hearts. But if you think that's all the Aztecs were about, you might as well believe the Romans were just about gladiator fights and orgies. Let's set the record straight. Because behind the blood-soaked headlines lies one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the pre-Columbian world. The Aztecs had a centralized government ruled by an emperor, a legal system with trained judges, and even a form of written records using codices, picture books with a purpose. Their capital city, Tenochtitlan, was a floating metropolis built on a lake with aqueducts, causeways, pyramids, garden, palaces, canals, and public infrastructures that left Spanish conquistadors straight up gobsmacked. They probably arrived and thought, wait, this isn't what we signed up for. Imagine sailing into what looks like Venice, but cleaner, greener, and with fewer guys in tights. While Europeans were tossing chamber pots into the street, the Aztecs had public toilets and waste management systems. Seriously, in comparison at that time, it made European cities look like muddy backyards. But that's not all. They had mandatory education. And not just for the rich. Boys, girls, nobles, commoners, everyone went to school. Some learned religion and warfare, others poetry, philosophy, and history. Imagine getting schooled in poetry and combat. You'd ace English class, or even conquer it. They were astronomers, engineers, artists, poets, architects. They even created a 365-day calendar, knew about eclipses, and tracked Venus with eerie accuracy. You know, total savages. Okay, but the sacrifices? Yes, human sacrifice was real. But it wasn't random violence, it was deeply tied to cosmology, agriculture, and the belief that the universe needed nourishment to keep going. To the Aztecs, sacrificing life wasn't cruelty, it was duty. It was how you paid rent to the gods for keeping the sun running. So no, the Aztecs weren't mindless killers. They were warriors, yes, but also poets, engineers, philosophers, and priests. A society of remarkable contrasts, not just blood and blades. Number 2. The Aztecs were a tiny, isolated tribe. When you hear Aztec, you might picture a couple dozen warriors huddled in a jungle, wearing feathered helmets, waiting for the next human sacrifice slot to open up. But nope, that's not even close. At their peak, the Aztecs ruled over an empire of 5 to 6 million people. That's not a tribe, that's a nation, and a booming one. As we already said, their capital, Tenochtitlan, was one of the greatest cities in the world. They built chinampas, aka floating farms, on the lake. Rows of fertile farmland anchored with trees, irrigated with fresh water, and producing so much food they practically invented urban farming centuries before hipsters did. They were feeding a city of 200,000 plus people, and doing it sustainably. Meanwhile, in Paris, people were probably wondering if bread counted as a vegetable. And isolated? Not even close. The Aztec Empire was basically the Mesoamerican version of a trade superhighway. Their merchants, Pochteka, were like elite, traveling salespeople/secret agents. These weren't your average market sellers shouting about mangoes. They traveled thousands of kilometers to trade, negotiate, and yes, sometimes spy. So what were they trading? Oh, just the hottest goods of the time. They exported obsidian, the sharpest blades around, finely woven cotton textiles, cacao beans, literal currency, feathers from tropical birds that looked like they belonged on a Met Gala runway, and salt, always in demand. In return, they imported luxury items and regional specialties: gold, silver, jade, rubber, seafood from the coasts, and exotic animals like jaguars and monkeys. Basically, if it glittered, growled, or could be turned into hot chocolate, they had it. And no, the Aztecs weren't loners. They had frenemies. They maintained diplomatic alliances, mostly through tribute and negotiation. But make no mistake, they had plenty of enemies too. Notably, the Tlaxcalans, who remained a major thorn in their side and eventually allied with the Spanish to bring the Aztecs down. So yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and cocoa beans. There was plenty of political drama. Number 3. the Spanish easily defeated the Aztecs because of superior weapons. You've heard the story. A few hundred Spanish soldiers with guns, steel, and horses show up, wave their shiny swords around, and boom, the Aztec Empire collapses. Yeah, not quite. Sure, the Spaniards had the tech advantage, but this wasn't a Call of Duty Conquistador edition. The truth is way messier and way more interesting. Let's talk about the real MVP of this conquest: smallpox. Before the Spanish even reached the capital, disease had sprinted ahead of them like an overachieving scout. Smallpox decimated entire Aztec communities, killing leaders, warriors, and commoners alike, sometimes before they even saw a Spaniard. Imagine trying to fight a war while half your army is literally dying of plague. Yeah, not ideal. But that's just half the story. The Spanish didn't do it alone. They played political Jenga with the Aztec Empire, exploiting old grudges between the Aztecs and the many city-states they ruled over, often by force. See, the Aztecs weren't exactly the friendliest neighbors. Many surrounding peoples had been taxed, conquered, or sacrificed one too many times, and they were not fans. Enter Malinche, a Nahua woman who became Cortez's interpreter, advisor, and cultural translator. She helped him negotiate alliances with indigenous groups who saw an opportunity to take revenge on the Aztecs. Some even provided thousands of warriors to fight with the Spanish. So no, Cortez wasn't some lone hero with a magic musket. He had guns, germs, and grudges. Number 4. The Aztecs disappeared after the Spanish conquest. And just like that, the Aztecs vanished into the jungle, never to be seen again. Yeah, no, that's not how people work. The truth? The Aztec Empire fell, sure, crushed under Spanish swords, disease, and a very long list of angry neighbors. But the Aztec people, they survived, and adapted, and kept going. After the conquest, many Nahua communities integrated into colonial society, but they didn't just roll over and forget who they were. They held on to their language, Nahuatl, which, by the way, is still spoken by over 1 million people in Mexico today. Also, shout out to Nahuatl for giving us words like chocolate, avocado, and tomato. You're welcome, world. They preserved elements of their religion, festivals, and agricultural techniques, often blending them with Catholicism to keep them alive under colonial rule. It's why modern-day Mexico is full of traditions that mix indigenous and Spanish roots, like Dia de los Muertos, which traces right back to pre-Columbian beliefs about the afterlife. And no, the Aztecs didn't retreat into ruins. Their descendants are everywhere, in cities, in villages, in marketplaces, selling tamales wrapped in corn husks, just like centuries ago, and in university halls, where Nahuatl-speaking scholars keep the legacy alive. So next time someone says the Aztecs disappeared, tell them to look around. They're still here, just with Wi-Fi now. Number 5. Montezuma thought Cortés was a god. Let's set the scene. It's 1519. Hernán Cortés and his crew land on the shores of what we now call Mexico. They look like armored aliens, shiny breastplates, fire-spitting sticks, weird beards, and ships with giant white sails. The Spanish chroniclers, writing after the conquest, would have you believe the Aztecs saw them and went, "Behold, the gods have returned," and specifically that Emperor Montezuma II thought Cortés was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity who, according to some legends, would return one day from the east. Sounds epic, right? There's only one problem. It's probably not true. No indigenous source from the time ever says this. The tale that Montezuma thought Cortés was a god comes almost entirely from the writings of the Spanish, particularly Cortés himself, and later historians trying to make the conquest sound, well, less like a brutal invasion and more like a divine invitation. Because if the emperor of one of the greatest civilizations in the Americas voluntarily welcomed you in as a god, it kind of softens the whole pillaging and toppling an empire thing. Convenient, huh? Oh, we didn't invade, they worshipped us. Sure, Hernán. Sure. Now, it's true that the Aztecs were deeply religious, and they had complex prophecies and symbolic interpretations of celestial events. Some Spanish writers, like Bernal Díaz del Castillo, said the Aztecs might have been confused or impressed by the Spanish. But there's a huge leap between impressed and worshipped. In reality, Montezuma was a skilled and cautious ruler. He was known for his diplomacy, strategic planning, and subtle methods of maintaining control over a vast empire. Most scholars today believe that when he met Cortés, he was following standard diplomatic protocol, welcoming a powerful foreign force with the hope of keeping things peaceful while he figured out their intentions. And let's be honest, the Spanish did bring terrifying new tech, unfamiliar animals like horses, and diseases that began to spread almost immediately. Montezuma may have hesitated, not because he thought Cortés was a god, but because he wasn't about to start a war without knowing what he was dealing with. Bonus twist? Some indigenous accounts describe Montezuma as being hostage or manipulated early on, which the Spanish downplayed. They didn't want to be seen as kidnappers of a divine king, just welcomed guests who accidentally took over an empire. Today, historians and indigenous voices are working hard to retell this chapter with more accuracy, removing the colonial filter that distorted so many of these narratives. Because no, Montezuma wasn't clueless. And no, the Aztecs didn't just hand over their empire because someone showed up with a boat and a beard. If this blew your mind, tell us which civilization we should uncover next, and hit that subscribe for more untold history.